Felina Whitlock had lived with silence for 3 long years, since her husband Thomas had been laid to rest beneath the lone cottonwood tree behind her small ranch house. The wind was her companion now, brushing across the plains like a whisper of a life once sweet. She worked hard, sunup to sundown, patching fences, tending her to horses, and keeping the memory of her husband alive through sheer determination. But one early autumn afternoon, as she stepped onto her porch with a bucket of water, she froze. A man lay collapsed on the steps, dust-covered, barely conscious, blood soaking through the side of his shirt. Her breath caught. Outlaws came through these parts, but rarely this close. And never like this, sir, she whispered cautiously, setting the bucket down. The stranger stirred, grimacing. Don't shoot, he rasped. Elena frowned. I don't have a gun. That's comforting, he muttered, before losing strength and slumping again. Against every rule she'd made for herself, she dragged the man heavy with muscle and exhaustion inside. His holster was empty, but the worn revolver tucked in his belt told her enough. He was no ordinary traveler. Once she cleaned the blood away, she found the bullet had grazed his ribs. It was treatable, fixable. The stranger jolted awake as she stitched the wound. Why are you helping me? He murmured. Because you're hurt, she said simply. He stared at her for a long moment, confusion softening into something else. Trust, maybe, or desperation. Name's Greg, he said quietly. Belina. He closed his eyes. You should have left me on that porch. Maybe, she replied, tying off the thread. But I didn't. Outside, the wind changed, rolling low across the plains. Trouble was coming. Elena sensed it in her bones. And by the look of the wounded outlaw she'd just saved, Greg was bringing more than a bullet wound into her quiet life. He was bringing danger and fate. Greg woke to the sound of clattering pans and the faint smell of brewing coffee. His side burned, but his head was clearer now. Sunlight streamed across the small kitchen, catching the golden strands in Elena's hair as she poured water into a kettle. She moved with quiet resilience, steady, measured, and deeply alone. He pushed himself upright, with a painful grunt. Elena turned sharply. You shouldn't be sitting up. I shouldn't be alive, he countered. Yet here I am. Her gaze softened not quite pity, but something close. Breakfast is almost ready. Greg watched her as she worked. She wasn't afraid of him. That puzzled him more than the bullet wound. Most decent folks feared outlaws, and they had reason to. He had seen things done, things he wished he could forget. But Elena treated him like a man, not a monster. You got family? He asked, breaking the silence. She stiffened. Had Greg immediately regretted asking. He recognized grief when he saw it. Outside the window, the world looked calm. Too calm. Elena, he said slowly, I need to know if anyone's come around asking about trouble. No, she said. Should there be? Greg exhaled heavily. 2 men been trailing me. They'll be looking. Why? He hesitated. The truth tasted bitter. Because I took something from them. Something they wanted to use for all the wrong reasons. Elena's hands paused over the potatoes she'd been slicing. Are they dangerous? Worse, Greg said. They're desperate. Elena swallowed. Then we need to be careful. He blinked. You're not throwing me out. I don't abandon people, she said simply. I won't start now. He stared at her, this strong, stubborn widow, who patched fences alone and faced danger without trembling. Something inside him shifted. After breakfast, Greg limped outside, helping repair a broken fence rail, despite her protests. Every movement hurt like fire, but the work cleared his mind. As they set the last post, horses appeared in the distance, to riders slow, deliberate. Felina stiffened. Friends of yours? No, Greg said, jaw tightening. Quite the opposite. The shadows on the horizon were growing, and they were coming for him. The riders didn't approach the ranch directly. Instead, they circled wide, watching from the ridge as the sun dipped low behind them, turning their silhouettes into dark, ominous figures. Greg's pulse hammered. He recognized the posture, the horses, the way they held their reins controlled, practiced, predatory. Elena stood beside him on the porch, fingers curled tightly around the edge of her shawl. Who are they? Men I used to ride with, Greg said quietly. Before I learned what they were willing to do, what changed? Greg looked at her. The truth wasn't easy. A line they crossed. One I wouldn't. He saw something flicker in her eyes. Respect, maybe. Or relief. As twilight thickened, the riders finally turned and rode off into the darkening horizon. They'll be back, Greg said. Then we prepare, Elena replied, calm steady. Together, they secured the doors, shuttered the windows, and moved the livestock into the barn. Greg taught her how to load the revolver he found tucked in Thomas's old tool chest. You sure you're all right with this? He asked. Elena swallowed hard, but nodded. I lost my husband to a fever, not violence, but I won't lose my home. Greg admired her strength. He'd met hardened outlaws with less grit. The night dragged on, heavy with anticipation. Greg stayed awake, keeping watch from the rocking chair by the window. Elena dozed on the couch, wrapped in a quilt, her breathing soft and steady. Around midnight, a faint noise snapped Greg alert. Hoofbeats, quiet, controlled, close. Elena, he whispered. She sat up instantly. Fear trembled in her hands, but her eyes were resolute. The front door rattled. Greg drew a sharp breath. Go to the kitchen. Stay low. The door creaked against low testing. Then a voice rasped through the wood. Gregory Miles, we know you're in there. Elena's eyes widened. Greg felt cold fury coil in his chest. You got something that belongs to us, the voice growled. Hand it over, and maybe we let the widow keep her home. Greg's jaw clenched. They knew about her, about everything. Stay behind me, he murmured. The storm had finally broken, and there was no turning back. The door shattered inward with a violent kick. Greg pulled Elena behind the kitchen table as splinters flew across the floor. Two men stormed inside Wyatt and Briggs, men he used to ride with, hard eyes, harder hearts. Wyatt sneered. Look at you, Greg, hiding behind a widow's skirts. Greg stood slowly, keeping himself between Elena and the intruders. You don't need her in this. Maybe not, Wyatt said, but she's part of it now. Briggs lifted his gun. Elena gasped. Greg stepped forward. I've got the ledger. Both men froze. Elena, Greg said softly, get the tin box from the mantel. She hesitated, but his eyes told her everything. Trust me. She handed him the box, and Greg opened it to reveal the small black ledger filled with names, payments, and every dirty deal the gang had made. Evidence enough to hang them twice over. Wyatt's eyes darkened. You were gonna turn us in? I was done being a part of it, Greg said. Briggs cocked his gun. Hand it over. Greg tossed the ledger onto the floor between them. The men moved toward it. Now, Elena, Greg shouted. Elena grabbed the lantern off the table and hurled it at the ground. It shattered, flames leaping instantly across the dry wood. Wyatt cursed, stumbling back. Briggs fired wildly, the gunshot cracking through the room. Greg tackled him, forcing the barrel upward. The bullet punched into the ceiling instead of Elena. Wyatt lunged for the ledger, but Elena, heart pounding, breath shaking, grabbed Thomas's old rifle from behind the door. She didn't aim at him. She aimed at the burning floorboards. The second shot cracked. Flames roared higher, cutting Wyatt off from them. Greg, she cried. Greg struck Briggs hard, sending him sprawling. Smoke filled the room. The fire crawled fast across the wall. We have to go, Elena yelled. Greg grabbed her hand and pulled her outside. They stumbled into the yard, coughing, the house blazing behind them like a beacon in the night. Wyatt and Briggs fled into the darkness, empty-handed, furious and afraid. Greg pulled Elena close, steadying her trembling shoulders. You saved us, he murmured. Elena looked at the burning home that had once been her life. We saved each other, and in the firelight, something unspoken passed between them. Something deep, something new. By sunrise, the house was nothing but charred remains and smoking rubble. Elena stood barefoot in the cool morning grass, staring quietly at the ashes. She had expected to cry. She had expected the grief to crush her, but instead, she felt light, free. Greg approached slowly, his side still aching, but wrapped tight and healing. "I'm sorry," he said softly. If you hadn't come here," she interrupted gently, "I'd be alone. And dead, most likely." He fell silent. Elena turned to face him. The early light painted him gold, softening the scars, the rough edges, the outlaw he had been. What she saw now was a man fighting to be better. "What will you do?" she asked. "Ride into town," Greg said. "Give the sheriff that ledger. End this for good. Clear my name if I can, and after." Her voice trembled, despite her trying to steady it. Greg hesitated. Hope flickered in his eyes, fragile and uncertain. "That depends. On what? On whether a strong, stubborn widow might let a man like me stick around." Elena felt warmth spread from her chest outward. For years she had lived in the shadow of grief. Now a new dawn stretched before her, unexpected, wild, and full of possibility. She stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on his cheek. "Greg, you're not the man you were." "No," he whispered. "Because I met you." Their lips met softly, at first hesitant, unsure. Then, with growing certainty, as though the land itself held its breath for them. When they finally pulled apart, the world seemed brighter. Greg exhaled shakily. "When this is over, I want to build you a new house." Elena smiled. "Then you'd better come back in one piece." "I promise." As he prepared his horse, Elena watched him with a strange mix of fear and faith. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but she also knew one truth, as steady as the rising sun. They had saved each other. Greg mounted, tipping his hat. "I'll be back, Elena." "I'll be waiting," she whispered. He rode toward town, toward justice, toward a future neither had expected. Elena stood among the ashes, but she was no longer alone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.